Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we continue with chapter 5 of the Essentials of Arabic Grammar, and we'll be taking a look at what's known in English as demonstrative pronouns. In Arabic, ismul ishara, and ishara meaning to indicate something, to point something out. So in this lesson, we'll learn how to say this, that, right? These versus those, etc. As well as how and when they're used throughout the Quran and other classical Arabic literature. If you haven't taken a look at the last lesson where we covered the personal pronoun, which plays a very key role in almost every Arabic sentence and makes up a large portion of the Quranic vocab, go and check that out. To download a copy of this text, click the link in the description below. You'll help me to publish more free beneficial content, and you'll help me to further my own personal studies in the process. If you've benefited from these lessons in any way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because it helps it to reach other people who may be able to benefit as well, inshallah. So let's jump right into it. We see here هذا هذان هؤلاء هذه هاتان هؤلاء ذلك ذانك أولئك تلك تانك أولئك. So this is pretty straightforward, right? They're used to point out something specific, indicate if it's near or far in distance, and highlight its importance or existence. So this versus that, right? These versus those. And just like the personal pronoun, this is a chart that should be memorized because, as it was mentioned, its usage is very frequent. So let's take a look at this first example here from the Quran. هذا, meaning this, in the masculine form. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله ربي وربكم فاعبدوه هذا صراط مستقيم. And so far, covering all of these different examples, we can see how what we've learned up to this point is so crucial because we're consistently seeing it. We see here at the beginning, harf nasb and its ism, right? Inna Allah, indeed Allah, Rabbi, right? Idafa fragment, the word Rabb, right? With the attached form of the pronoun ana, so my Lord, right? Wa Rabbukum, right? Same thing here, the word Rabb with the attached form of the pronoun Antum, you all, right? So my Lord and the Lord of all of you. Fa'buduhu, so worship him. And then we see here, Hadha siratun mustaqim. And Hadha here, this, it's actually in a state of rafa. And in the next chapter on nominal sentence structure, we're going to get into how we can distinguish this. So it's in the state of rafa, but just like the personal pronoun, it veers away from the common signs of a typical ism. So hadha is hadha, whether it's rafa, nasb, or jar. There's no way to show the sign of its state, right? And this is where having a solid understanding of grammar comes in, right? So hadha siratun mustaqim, right? This is siratun mustaqim. And this is a sifa wa mawsuf fragment. So we're clearly seeing how all of these things come together, right? And in this next ayah, we see an example of hadha remaining the same, even though it's in the state of nasb. Inna hadha, harf nasb, inna, right? And hadha is actually in a state of nasb, right? Remember, all of these are nouns just the same, but they veer away from the common signs of your typical noun, right? So inna hadha, indeed this, lahuwa al-fawzul azim. And this is something that we should all be able to translate by now. Indeed this, it is truly the great attainment. Let's take a look at these next set of ayat here. Hadihi. And this, yani hadihi, means this as well, right? But in the feminine form. And we see here in this first ayah, هذه النار التي كنتم بها تكذبون. هذه النار, right? This fire. And you'll remember from one of the previous lessons, an-nar is a word that is treated feminine grammatically, even though it doesn't show a sign that it's a feminine word, because that's how the early Arabs used it. And that's why هذه is used instead of هذا, right? هذه النار. And التي we're going to take a look at. But this fire is the one that, or that which, kuntum is what we'll call a strange verb for now, right? And it's from kana, right? To be. In the past tense, was, right? So kuntum, what all of you were. Biha, harf jar ba, and connected to it is the attached pronoun form of hiya. So about it, tukadhibun, denying, right? So this fire is that which you were all in denial about. Wa inna hadhihi ummatukum ummatan wahidatan wa ana rabbukum fattaqun. And the same thing is happening here, right? Veering away from the common signs of a typical ism, in the sense that there is no sign to show its status, right? But we know that هذه here is in a state of nasb. Why? Because we have the harf inna, right? Which is a harf nasb before it. And it's an ism just the same. So indeed, this is your community, right? The word umma is feminine. And the easy way to tell that it's a feminine word is because it has a ta marbuta at the end, right? So ummatukum, same word here, but connected to it is the attached pronoun form of antum, right? Ummatukum, your community. And again, hadhihi used as opposed to hadha because umma is feminine grammatically. So indeed, this is your community, your nation, your religion, one ummah. Sifa wa mawsuf fragment. Wa ana, right? And the pronoun ana, wa ana and I, rabbukum, I am your Lord, right? Fattaquni. And this ni at the end here is actually the attached form of the pronoun ana, ni, but in short form. So sometimes this is done. So fattaquni, so fear me. And again, we're going to get more comfortable understanding these different types of formats and seeing them how they're used throughout different texts. So you'll also want to follow along with some of the Arabic to English translations that I'll be posting, because it will help you by giving you more exposure to the Arabic language and to these different types of formats, inshallah. So taking a look at the next set of examples here, هذان. So these two in the dual form, masculine. So we see here, قالوا, they said, right? Referring to the people of Fir'aun. In هذان, referring to Moses and Aaron, peace and blessings be upon them both. In هذان, these two, لساحران, right? So sahir, a magician. Sahirani in the dual form. So in هذان لساحران. Indeed, these are just two magicians who are trying to expel you from your land, etc., etc. And this next example is actually a portion of a hadith that mentions the gates of paradise being open on Mondays and Thursdays, and that all of the servants of Allah who don't commit shirk, who don't associate partners with Allah, will be forgiven, except the one who holds a grudge against another. And so the Prophet ﷺ mentions it will be said, أَنذِرُوا هَذَيْنِ, delay these two. So this is how hadhani changes in the dual form if it's in the state of nasb or jar. Hadhaini, right? And anziru is a verb in the command tense. And this has been mentioned throughout many of the past lessons, right? But of course, when we get to the verb, we'll dive into it a little bit further. But the object of a verb is typically in the state of nasb. And this comes after this verb, right? هذين. So this is actually in the state of nasb. حتى يصطلحا. So delay these two until they reconcile amongst each other. And then we move on to هاتان, which is these two in the feminine form, right? Hatani. And I couldn't find an example of hatani, but we see this ayah here. Qala, he said, right? Referring to the father of the two women that Musa alayhi salam helped get water for their flock. So Qala, he said, Inni, indeed I, uridu an unkihaka, I want to wed ihda binatayya hataini, one of these two daughters of mine to you. Hataini. So whenever it's in the state of nasb or jar, this is how it changes, right? Instead of hatani, it becomes hataini. And this is important because it's one thing to memorize this chart and it's another thing to see how it comes together, how it's used throughout the Quran and throughout other forms of classical literature as well. And then we move on to هؤلاء, these, referring to a group of three or more. And we see here هؤلاء, these, قومنا, our people, اتخذوا, they took, من دونه, other than him, right? Referring to Allah, alihatan, right? As gods. And just like hadha and hadihi, haula'i has no change whether it's in the state of rafa, nasb, or jar. And we can see a clear example of this in the next ayah. فَدَعَا رَبَّهُ. So he called upon his Lord, right? أَنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ. That these, right? هَؤُلَاءِ, ism just the same. And though it doesn't show the signs that we're used to signifying the state of a noun, it's in the state of nasb, and we know this because it's after a harf nasb. So أَنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ. That these قوم مجرمون, they're a criminal people. And قوم مجرمون, a sifa wa mawsuf fragment. And قوم, it refers to a group. And that's why it's used with the plural form of mujrim, right? Mujrimun, right? Versus mujrimuna, the plural form. So this completes the words that indicate nearness. And now we move on to the words that indicate distance, starting with ذَلِكَ. ذَلِكَ meaning that in the masculine form. And we see this in Surah Al-Baqarah, right? ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ. That book. So it's often translated as this book. But Allah uses ذَلِكَ, signifying that this is something far out of reach. Right? This is something far above and beyond what you could have attained on your own. You could not have attained this guidance and come to these conclusions on your own. This guidance could only be from your Lord, but also signifying the Quran as it is in Lawhul Mahfuz, right? So ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابِ, that book, لَا رَيْبَ, there is absolutely no doubt, فِيهِ, in it, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, a guidance for those who have taqwa. And then we move on to tilka. And tilka means that as well, right? But in the feminine form. And we see here, tilka al-jannatu. Al-jannah, we know is feminine, has a ta marbuta at the end. So tilka al-jannatu, right? As opposed to dhalika al-jannatu, right? That garden, that paradise, allati, which we'll be taking a look at, is that which nurithu, we give as inheritance, min ibadina, to those of our slaves, man kana taqiyan, who had taqwa. And again, no change to either of these, whether they're in the state of rafa, nasb, or jar. And then we move on to dhanika, those in the dual masculine form, right? Again, indicating distance. And we see here in this ayah, فَذَانِكَ burhani, and burhan are proofs, evidence. Those are two proofs. مِن رَبِّكَ, right? From your Lord. إِلَى فِرْعَوْنَ وَمَلَئِهِ, to Fir'aun and his council. So just like هَذَانِ or hatani, only in the dual form do they change when they're in the state of nasb or jar, right? In which dhanika would become dhainika, right? And I couldn't find an example of dhainika, but it changes in the state of nasb or jar, right? Dhainika. I couldn't find any examples of tanika and tainika, the dual feminine form of tilka, but I think that the examples that were given are sufficient for us to see how they would be used throughout a particular text, inshallah. And lastly, we have ulaika, those, right, referring to a group of three or more. Again, from Surah Al-Baqarah, ulaika, those people, as if they're outstripping the rest. Those people, ulaika, ala, right, they're upon, hudam min rabbihim, guidance from their Lord. Ulaika humul muflihun, those are the successful people. And with that, we complete this lesson on the demonstrative pronoun. And in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at the relative pronoun, right, which is often used to connect sentences in the Arabic language. Hopefully, this has given you all some valuable insight as to how these types of pronouns are used throughout the Quran and throughout the Arabic language as a whole. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.